Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. What's your FHOA story? Part 2. I had a satellite dish installed in the front of my house due to trees in the back that block the signal. A few years later, I get a violation for not having approval for said dish. I informed the HOA manager that the FCC restricts the HOA from not allowing me to place the dish in a spot where it can get a signal, and I have no problem filing a complaint if needed. The HOA then agrees to drop the fines if I have DirecTV come out and fill out a statement that the only spot for my dish is in the front of the house. What a waste of my time and the satellite installer's time. While I was helping my buddy move stuff out of his house to a new house, my mom called me saying there was a family emergency with my father and I needed to come home right away. I tell my buddy that I need to go and drive home as fast as possible without getting pulled over. My neighborhood has a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit. We live in a pretty diverse neighborhood, so quite a few people don't pay attention to it. Well, as I'm pulling 30 miles per hour going up my street, I spot one of the HOA enforcers standing on her lawn and sprint into the middle of the street at the last minute. I slam on the brake and she runs up to me screaming about how dangerous it is to drive that fast and how I need to slow down because there are children. Children are usually inside or monitored by parents when they're outside, and what I could have done. I simply gaped at her and said, "Normally, I'd expect a stupid child to run into the street without looking first. Guess I was right." My dad died laughing when we later received a letter from her explaining the situation in detail. My HOA fee for my condo costs $300 a month, and as far as I can tell, they do nothing. No landscaping, no property improvements, no trash, nothing. They can only account for a third of their revenue, the rest going into a fund. But for some reason, I would bet my life savings if there were a problem with the roof or something, we'd be hit with a hefty assessment. No one that lives here is on the board, it's a management company. So we're basically paying rent on a property we pay a full mortgage on. They refuse to update the common area carpets, even though the carpet is 25 plus years old and moldy. Wouldn't have bought if I knew. Two unbelievably stupid incidents stand out. One, after stating that the neighborhood was pet-friendly, we got a talking to from someone saying how we shouldn't have our dog outside on the lawn because it will ruin the grass. Two, they told us our Christmas lights were distracting. On Christmas. We had one set on the porch, everyone else's were on the roof, fence, etc. Personally, I think that the HOA had a vendetta against us. I inherited a house that predates the local HOA. 1920s for the house and 1950s the HOA formed. Our deed explicitly states that we have an easement to a dock space and beach access. Every year since they formed, they left my parents alone since they were not part of the HOA. Well, back in the 70s when my parents inherited the house, they bought a boat. When they went to exercise the easement, they were told that they had to wait for an opening. A reasonable request. So they waited a few years and finally got a slip. After a few years, the HOA came looking for dues. Rekeyed the gate, attempted to have their boat towed out, and sent letters of dues owed. After spending months in legal battles, they and the HOA came to a handshake agreement that we will pay the dock fees and nothing else. Another reasonable request. Well, come to me inheriting the house. They are now saying that I owe dues dating back to the original lawsuit. New management doesn't know of the handshake agreement. I showed them the deed and percentage dues paid for dock upkeep, contacted past HOA board members that confirmed the agreement, but they want the rest. If this goes back to court, I will try to keep the original agreement my parents have since I am paying for dock upkeep. But if they want all the back dues, I will exercise my easement and build my own dock with blackjack and H. Maybe not the blackjack and H, but I will build my own. So I used to live in this little group of townhomes. Behind the houses, there was a gigantic lawn where all the kids used to play. Basically, an old guy and his wife started taking pictures and threatened to report it to the HOA unless we left. We ended up just staying there and the old guy got sick of it. Plus, some kids' parents threatened to sue for taking pictures. I have lived in an HOA for 3/4 of my life. First one is when I was about 13, the neighborhood made it mandatory all children wear a helmet for any moving plaything, bikes, skateboards, scooters, etc. Well, we were sent multiple warnings because I would walk from the entrance from my neighborhood to my house because the roads were S and a pain to ride my skateboard on, and I knew to strap that S between my back and backpack to avoid being talked to by the HOA members. My mom just beat at them and threatened to sue for not maintaining the roads, for which we paid our fee to help cover. Second time was when I was 20, I had to give my mom rides to and from work for about a month. There was this house with S kids running into the street not looking, throwing bottles at cars, leaving S in the middle of the road. Well, we got a fine for speeding and endangering children from the HOA, which my mom thought was interesting because she was the president of the HOA at the time trying to control the kind of S the kids were doing. Turns out lady was in the HOA board and forged some S and was trying to take over as president, blah blah blah. My mom started recording our trips home and sent a real fine to the house and had child protection services brought to their house. My mom is an ice cold B when you cross her. House got foreclosed by the bank anyways, and my mom stepped down 3 weeks after the incident cause, in her words, these uneducated Bs aren't gonna give me crow's feet. Not quite an HOA, but very similar. My subdivision came with a deed of covenant regulation, the style of house you could build, and an architectural review board to enforce it. Sent my plans to the ARB, they got rejected. The reasons they gave were all BS. For example, the proposed color of brick is out of keeping with the rural character of the western portion of the county. The chairman of the ARB was our prospective neighbor. Before the meeting, I spent a day driving around in about a 5-mile radius taking pictures of houses with similar colored bricks to the color I wanted to use. I also looked through the deed of covenant looking for other stipulations and took pictures of the other ARB members' houses, then reviewed them for violations. I took my architect along to the meeting. She helped me demolish some of the more technical objections. Then, it was my turn. I went through the deed of covenant. Me. I took a drive around the neighborhood. Can you verify that these are all local homes and describe the brick color? Lays down a dozen or more photos. All. Yeah, well, but, okay. Me. Says here no log cabins. Randy, this is your house, right? I slapped down photo of his log cabin. Randy. Yeah, but that's not a log cabin, it's a log home. And how'd you get a picture of my house? Me. I took them from public property. Architect. Goes into 2-minute diatribe on log cabin versus log home. Me. Barry. The ARB says no visible TV antennas. This is a picture of your roof. What's that? Barry. Well, it's a TV antenna, but the FCC says I have a right to put a TV antenna up. Me. Sure, but it's in violation of the deed of covenant, isn't it? I mean, you can't just pick and choose the rules you want to keep and the rules you want to violate. Barry. Okay. Me. And here, doesn't the deed of covenant say you can't put up decorative street lamps? What's that in the middle of the circle in your drive? Barry. Hanks head. My wife bought that. Me. Gentlemen, are we done here? I had the architect make a few changes to the plans. There were some details I had already decided I wanted deleted anyway that the ARB objected to, resubmitted them, and bingo! Approved. First, the whole community has terrible phone signal. My family didn't have the stickers for our cars to let us go inside our neighborhood automatically because we just moved in and we had to get a money order. Anyways, you're allowed to have only one phone number set to open the gate so you can allow your guests in, so because we didn't have our stickers, I had to use our code. There's no security, just a keypad. When we put in my code to get in, the gate would not open. I called the clubhouse and they said to just call them and they'll let us in. However, she said no one will be in the clubhouse after 9. I called and told them my father's working and doesn't come home till about 1 to 3 in the morning. How will he get inside? They told me, we don't know what to tell you. I got so peed. We just moved in. Their gate is effing up and now they're telling me they don't know how my father's going to get inside his own home. I was livid. I was so stressed out wondering what we're gonna do for my dad. Eventually, after we finally moved all our stuff in the house, I decided to go back to the gate and keep trying my code. Turns out, because of the terrible phone signal, the gate is inconsistent. Sometimes it opens after one click, and sometimes you have to repeatedly click the number to let you in. I was relieved, but still peed. My dad didn't even want to move there because of association, and they already proved why. And for anyone wondering why we would even move here, we were very desperate to move because our contract was ending with our current home that the owner sold. Also, we didn't know they would be so strict and ridiculous. This took place a few years ago when I was still in college. I grew up in a quiet beach town in Florida and, like most communities of that variety, lived in an HOA. My grandmother lived down the road from us in a neighboring HOA. During one summer between college semesters, at the request of my parents, I stayed at my grandmother's house. She's up north for the summer and the house needs to be looked after. Sounds great to me. One day, I receive a notice from the HOA's lawyer of impending legal action for parking my car in the driveway. Yes, you read that correct. This was not a warning, not a fine, but a notice that they'll take me to court. I see this and reach out to my brother, an attorney, and ask him to help me out. We reviewed the HOA's bylaws, and surprise, there are no prohibitions against parking in the driveway. Street parking is forbidden, parking in the grass is forbidden, and junk/untitled vehicles are forbidden. But there are no restrictions against parking in one's own driveway. My car was an economy car, a newer model and very well kept since I'm a big car fanatic, but it definitely stood out in a neighborhood of elder folks' Lexus and BMWs. So my brother responds to the HOA's lawyer with a letter explaining that there is no bylaw against parking in the driveway and that the HOA's threat is unfounded. Normally, this is where it would end, right? HOA would presumably back off since there are no rules being broken here. Nope. They doubled down and threatened that they're happy to take this to court. Okay, seems like a waste of a frivolous lawsuit that they simply could not win. To make things better, I started regularly walking the neighborhood and photographing cars parked in the driveway at all times of day and night. The neighborhood is only 11 houses and 8 of them have cars left overnight in the driveway. This is really bizarre. Surely they aren't sending these legal threats to the other residents. My brother sends my photographs to the HOA lawyer asking if the other residents are being targeted in this manner. Well, that seemed to do it. The HOA lawyer backed off and left us alone. For a little while. A few weeks later, I get another threat of legal action. Again, not a warning or fine, pertaining to noise violations. The threat outlines that I've been throwing loud, rambunctious parties that have been disturbing the neighborhood and that the HOA would seek a lien against our property. This is where it gets good. The date in question from the HOA threat? Yeah, I was out of town with receipts to prove my travel. The house was completely vacant when I was apparently bursting people's eardrums. Same thing happens. We show we won't be threatened and the HOA lawyer backs off. Now, you're probably wondering why they're so aggressively going after me. Here's what we'd come to discover towards the end of the summer. A wealthy developer was buying up the properties in that neighborhood one by one. They were using threats of lawsuit to get residents to sell cheap or outright fabricate claims to use as liens against the properties. They see me and think a kid will be an easy target. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.